So good day, everyone. Thanks for taking some time today. Really, what I want to show you today, really the two sides of this. There's from the perspective of remedy in this case, like a service desk analyst, for example, really what that workflow looks like for them, and how giving them that single pane of glass, things can be very easy and automated. And then on the back end of that, I want to show you all the things that can go on under the hood, right? Because the idea is for the remedy, the service desk analyst, for example, we want that experience to be very, very simple and not require any additional training or additional tools or anything like that. So those are the two basic sides I want to walk through today. What we have here now, of course, is my remedy environment. And the idea here, like Tanya had mentioned, is having that single pane of glass, right? We have everything that we need in a single tool, in this case, remedy. So now I'm gonna play the role of a service desk analyst, and I'm gonna fill in my incident like I always would. Right, well, Matt is my customer. I have some notes about the issue. Of course, I'm using a template here because you're not here to watch me type. And the idea behind our remedy connector is that you're going to configure some number of conditions or thresholds under which Neverbridge should get involved, whether that's based on priority or service or category or some combination of that. You're going to define different conditions under which you might want to launch a particular Neverbridge template. Right, if category is this and severity is that, I want to map that to, say, a network template or something like that. For demonstration purposes today, I have my integration set up very simply on purpose because I want to really illustrate the mechanics more than anything. So what I have set up is just anything that is priority critical or high will be sent to Neverbridge to start that workflow. So as I'm going through and filling in my incident, I'm going to pick my urgency and my impact that will drive the priority. Now, in this case, this has turned into a critical incident by my definition, and so that threshold was met. So I create the incident in remedy like I always would. And now, because that condition was met, an Neverbridge incident gets launched in the background based on that template's configuration. And of course, I'll show you that template in a moment. But what is happening now in the background is people are getting emails or text messages or phone calls or however you might have that configured to get resolvers or stakeholders or people like that informed and engaged to deal with an issue. Now, part of that single pane of glass here in remedy is now me as the service desk analyst. I don't need to go log into another tool, perhaps, to go see what kind of responses am I getting. You know, are my resolvers answering? Are people joining the bridge? Or are my stakeholders confirming receipt of the message so they can say, yes, I'm aware, or something like that. And what we have here is, if we bring in the details, we can see who's been contacted and what time, who's answered, who's not answered, and all that kind of response. We can see here, I got one response. If I look more specifically here at this response, we can see that Thomas has responded via email. You might be curious on how that person responded to the message. And of course, the date and time, what happened. Now, another component of our connector, not only can remedy launch messaging through Neverbridge, like it did in this case, but there's also a two-way component to this. So certain events that happen in Neverbridge are sent back to remedy through a webhook. So in this case, I have it set up where I'm calling out an on-call team to deal with the issue. And in this case, the first person that says, you know, yes, I'm going to take this incident, they become the assignee of the incident automatically. So if we reload our incident, we can see because Thomas was the first one to respond, now that event was sent back from Neverbridge to remedy, and now Thomas is the assignee of this incident. Where this can be particularly useful is, let's say I talked to Matt, so I took the initial call, and then Matt calls back, say 10 minutes later, gets a different analyst. The analyst can look up Matt's incident and see that, oh, look, Thomas has been assigned and he's working on the issue. He'll contact you if he needs any further information. So this can just expedite that information sharing, so we know that someone is engaged in working on the issue in this case. Also here, this also could be used to send updates perhaps. I might want to update some notes about the incident, send that out as an update, and we can configure conditions to do that as well. Perhaps using a different template. Maybe you launch the initial new incident that becomes critical. That goes to resolvers, of course, because they're going to fix the problem. Maybe then later you send an update and you have a condition to trap where you want to send an update using a different incident template to a different audience, say stakeholders or end users or something like that. So it can be very, very flexible on how we want to notify people and map different conditions to different incident templates. Now, this all looks very simple, and that's the idea. Is we want this experience for the service desk analyst to be very easy and simple, and not require additional training or really any changes in workflow, right? That's the goal here, right? In this case, I might not even know what Neverbridge is. Maybe I'm new. I just started a week ago. I don't even know what Neverbridge is, but I've been taught how to use Remedy, and I just use that, and the right thing happens based on how you've configured it. So that's really where that power comes in. Now, on the back end, if I switch over to the Neverbridge side for a moment, there's a lot of things going on here, and a lot of tools that are available to use to help automate this sort of workflow. So we can see here is the incident, the Neverbridge incident that was launched as a result of this particular incident from Remedy, 1858. And if I click into this, we can see an Neverbridge incident really is a very simple thing. It's really meant to be a container for all the communications related to this particular event, right? So an Neverbridge incident is not the same as a Remedy incident, right? We're not an ITSM system. That's not what we do. We complement ITSM and provide that communication. So we can see here, we've launched this initial notification, and if we look at the individual broadcast itself, all the same detail that I was showing you earlier about who was contacted, who answered, who didn't, and all of that kind of information, this is all the detail that gets pulled back into the Remedy ticket. So you can see who's who's been contacted, who's answered, who hasn't, all of that kind of information. Now, behind the scenes in the incident template itself is where all the tools are to help automate processes like this. So if I open this one up here, this is the particular template that I had mapped to my condition in Remedy. And so incident templates are very simple and very easy. There's no coding required. It's all drag and drop configuration kind of work. And so what we first have here is for a particular incident type, the first thing we want to define on a template is, what do I need my inputs to be? Or more specifically in this case, what fields from the Remedy incident do I want to be part of my messaging? So in this case, I'm pulling in the incident, the company, so on and so forth. These are the details that Remedy is sending over from the incident itself. They get filled out, so to speak. And then we can take those variables and build our message templates so our messaging can be very crisp and consistent, right? It looks the same way every time. What we've done here is one of the optional features where I want to have two different messages because I want to tailor the content for the device that I'm sending to. So up top here I have a title and a plain text body, and that's going to be delivered to SMS or to voice calls if you're using that delivery method. And so that body I want to be very short and sweet and to the point. So we just have the summary of the incident and some details in the title. Then what I've done for email or push notifications is I have a more detailed and a bit more formatted version of the message. So I can have some more details in here. I can have colors and some formatting. Maybe I have a link back to the Remedy incident perhaps so people can get to it if they're mobile, for example. This is where this content can be very rich for this type of message. Also here is where you'll decide what type of message you want to send. And for those of you that may be familiar with mass notification, hopefully this should look a little familiar because it's all the same tools under the hood. We're just packaging it up a little different to make the workflow a little more structured. So here we have the three types of messages. Standard, which is typically used for that stakeholder or customer type of message. And that's simply, I'm delivering the message to you and I'm asking you to confirm receipt, right? That confirmation is the only feedback I'm looking for. So that's typically used for a stakeholder or customer message. Speaking more to an IT resolver sort of audience, where I see most often there, we're going to use a polling or a conference bridge. Where polling can be very useful is I might want to send out my message to my resolver team about here's the incident. Are you available to respond to this? Because perhaps one or more people on your response team is already busy working a different incident, perhaps. And so we might poll out to say, are you available to take this? Yes, I can. No, I can't. Might be the two options to choose from. Where that can be particularly useful is in the case of an escalation where I might not want to call everybody on call all at once. I want to go to my on-call calendar. I want to call the primary on call and see if that person is available. And if they say, no, I'm not, I'm already working an incident, let's say, I want to immediately then go to the next person rather than waiting the 5 or 10 minutes or whatever you figured for that escalation. So that negative acknowledgement can help drive more efficiency. If someone says, I can't take this, well, great, let's move on to the next person and ask them. And of course, there's the one-click conferencing, which is especially useful for major incidents where we need to get some number of people on a conference call quickly, right? And that's a big time saver here. Whether you're using one of the bridges that comes with Neverbridge, right, that we give you to use, but you can also put your own bridges in this list and configure that as well. So you could, if you have your own conference bridges, you can add that as well. What's special about the conference bridge notification is, in the case of a voice call, we're going to call them, they'll answer the phone, the message will be read to them, whatever the message was, and then they'll be prompted to simply press 1 to join the bridge. So it can be very, very fast to get people on a conference call, very convenient for people to join a conference call, you know, say if they're driving perhaps, right? They can answer the phone, listen, they press 1, rather than try to type in an access code or something like that. So that could be a big time saver there in the case of a conference call. Once we have all the content defined, right, and we have our structure and our message all defined, then we move on to, well, who do we want to send this to? And I'm going to start simple here. In a lot of cases, at least in my experience, you're going to have some idea of who you want a message to go to for a particular incident, right? If it's an application or network outage or infrastructure or whatever, however you choose to organize or categorize these types of events, more than likely you're going to know who you want to notify, at least from a resolver perspective. Now, you might not know specifically which individuals, but you're going to be able to say things like, I need my on-call network engineers or something like that. And in those cases where you do know who you want this to go to, this is where you can define ahead of time in the incident template who is going to get notified for this, whether it's simply a group of people, right, or individuals. You can, of course, be very simple. Or maybe we want to go to an on-call calendar and find out I need to notify my on-call applications group in this case, let's say. And at this exact moment in time, these 3 people are on call as of right now. Right? It's very dynamic. It's all based on time of day, day of week, shift, things like that. So I have my 3 on-call people right now in this particular case. Now I could, of course, notify all of them all at the same time. We're very good at that. But part of the goal in IT alerting is we want, as much as possible, to help you be more targeted and efficient in your messaging. So maybe we don't need to call everybody for every incident, right? And this is where you say, I have my on-call calendar, and I have a sequence and a rotation defined for who's on call first, second, third, things like that. This is where you can use that, take advantage of that sequencing and say, all right, I'm going to wait 10 minutes in between people. In this case, I just need one of the 3. I don't care which one. So I'm going to call number 1, phone, text, email, whatever the case might be. If they don't answer in 10 minutes, or in the case of polling, they say, no, I can't, for example, then I'll move on to number 2 and call, text, email, push, things like that, and so on and so forth. This just allows you to be more targeted. Now this is fairly static in a way, right? We're just saying notify this particular on-call team from this particular calendar. You can also make this very dynamic and use incident variables on that front-end form to define who I want this to go to more dynamically. So I might take something, a contact's attribute, like what calendar they're on, what group they're in, something like that, and map that to one of the incident variables. So I might have an incident variable for calendar, and based on which value gets picked, that's the calendar I go to notify people. So they can be very dynamic depending on your needs, right? You can handle a lot of different scenarios with a single template by making it more dynamic that way. You can also simply just add conditions. You might have one-off conditions you might want to add for additional contacts, right? So for example, you might have something very simple where you just simply say, right, if the priority is critical, then I have this special group I want included automatically all the time, right, my key customers, let's say, or something like that. So you can build in conditions a couple of different ways to make the messaging more dynamic. What I like about this is that it provides a lot of consistency, right? The same thing happens the same way every time, and there's no surprises. So I'm a big fan of that. Now back to escalation for a moment, right? I'm calling my on-call resources and I'm going to sequence through them. Well, what if none of them answer, right? Well, this is where then you could build in additional levels of escalation. So if I'm not getting, in this case, my one response that I'm looking for, I just need someone to respond. If I don't get that in, say, 30 minutes, I want to notify a wider audience, or I have a backup team or a leadership team or something like that. And what if they don't answer? I could add another level. And so you could have this sequencing and escalation built in this multi-level sort of sense. If the situation warrants that kind of aggressiveness, so to speak, in messaging. Moving on to the delivery settings, right? This controls how do we want to deliver this message to people. And so here, and of course you'll have your defaults, and this is where you'll define what's the from going to look like on the email, what phone number is going to show up as caller ID for a voice call, and of course what delivery methods are we going to use, and in what order. And for those of you that maybe, I hope you're familiar with how we work, but we run in that rotational methodology. We don't necessarily want to contact every device all at the same time, right? We want to be more targeted with this. So we're going to try the first device, in this case, a push notification. And then we're going to wait a minute to see if that person answers. And if they don't, then we're going to send them a text, and then we'll wait, and then an email, or whatever you might have configured for order and devices. So that we know when they respond, we can stop trying to contact them, right? We don't want to call and email and text all the time. We want to give people that facility to say, yes, I can take this, or I've joined the bridge, or I've simply confirmed receipt, whatever the case might be. Then we know we can stop trying to contact them because, of course, we don't want to cause message fatigue, right? That's another goal of ours, is we don't want to be sending everything to everybody and then people start to ignore it. I lived that life years ago when I was in IT, and we would just get called. Everyone got called for everything, and you'd get a phone call at 2 in the morning, and you'd say, nope, that's not me, and you'd hang up and you go back to sleep, right? Not very efficient. So this is where we want to try to help that. One of the useful things here, of course, is you can have conditions on your delivery settings as well. So if you have, based on any of the inputs coming in from Remedy, priority, company, contact, the day of the week, things like that, we can change how we want these messages delivered. So a very simple example might be, again, if it's critical, I want to change how this is delivered. So because it's a critical incident, I want to call you first because I want to get your attention right away. So I'm going to start lighting up phones first because that's more face as opposed to a text or email. So I want your phone to ring so you're aware of it right now, or something like that. And also, because it's critical, I'm going to try to contact you up to 10 times, maybe. I'm going to call you, text you, email you, wait a few minutes, try them all again if you haven't answered, try them all again if you haven't answered. So again, you can control really the aggressiveness, I like to say, of how the messages are being delivered, so we can really be trying to get a hold of people. And again, this is all based on the data coming from Remedy. It's consistent, it's repeatable, it happens the same way every time. There's no surprises. So people just know, oh, on a critical incident, my phone's going to ring. And that's just how it is. And people can be prepared for that, right? And I'm a big fan of that consistency. One of the other neat things you can do with these incident templates is an incident in Neverbridge is a very basic sort of workflow, right? There's 3 phases, right? The incident is new, and it's being updated or perhaps resolved, and then it's being closed. And what we can do, should you feel the need to, is you can have this template behave differently based on what phase that it's in. So maybe on new, I'm going to call and text and email and do all this crazy stuff. But on an update, I don't need to make phones ring on an update. So on an update, I'm going to have just text and email, let's say, or something like that. Or I want the contacts to be slightly different or something like that. So you can have more flexibility in your templates based on what phase of the incident you're in, right? And then say maybe on closed is only email, because I don't need to make phones make any noise on a closed notification, perhaps, right? Just the ability to tailor the message to the phase that you're in. Like I had mentioned, you don't have to use the same template over and over and over. You might have different templates for different audiences related to the same event, and you can facilitate that. This sort of message that's real technical goes to the resolvers, and then maybe I have another template that has a little less technical version, perhaps, or uses some different fields from Remedy, and that goes to stakeholders or customers or something like that. So you can really tailor the message for the audience. Maybe for customers, you probably don't want to make phones ring necessarily, so you can control and have more control over the messaging to the right audience. Now, one of the other things I talked about that can be very powerful is that on-call scheduling. And this is a component we have inside of Neverbridge where we want to define calendars and rotations and things like that for our on-call. So I wanted to give you a little flavor for what the kinds of things you can do here. I like to start simple, right? You can do something as simple as simply a 24/7 on-call, and it rotates through staff. right? So here's the first example I want to run through. And what's really cool about this is we can have multiple layers on a given shift, right? A calendar will have at least one shift, right? In this case, 24/7. You could do days and nights. You could do tree shifts. Lots of flexibility there. But what's really cool about this is now we can have multiple layers on a shift and have independent rotations for things. So in this example here, I have my on-call, my frontline technicians. Dale and Lisa are on call at this exact moment, first and second. That's my escalation path. And if I look at this layer, this is where you can define things like rotations. I want to have in this case, I have a 3-person team. Maybe we'll throw Andy in there too. I have a 4-person team, and here's how we want to rotate. I want 2 people on shift at all times, but rotate 1 person at a time. So you go from secondary to primary to off in this case. And I could simply rotate when the shift starts, or I might say I just want to rotate on Mondays every week. And that's how my rotation works. So that's that. Then I have my management layer, that's Jim, and Jim is always on call as the manager, so he doesn't rotate at all. But maybe I have something like a team lead sort of a concept, and they have a rotation too, but it's different than my front line. So I want to add a new layer called team lead, and we'll say Andy is my team lead, and Matt, let's say. And they rotate as well, but I only need one of them on call at any one time. And their rotation is monthly, so they just rotate on the last day of the month, right? So I can create that new layer, and I put my team lead up here, and now here I can very easily define a very dynamic escalation path. So on any given day, here's my escalation path for this particular team. I can have my frontline technicians, a team lead as an escalation point, finally a manager. I could add another layer for a director or something like that. So lots of power here in flexibility in setting up these rotations. Who do I call right now? Another important component of this, of course, is things like overrides and exceptions, right? Of course, you'll have a rotation and a schedule set up, but there's always going to be exceptions. Someone's out sick, someone's on vacation, someone needs to go to the dentist, from 4 or 5 o'clock one night or something like that, and you can manage those exceptions now really simply. One way you could simply delegate the management of this calendar to say the group's manager perhaps is one option, and they could manage those exceptions in here. Matt's going to be unavailable or something like that. But more importantly, through our mobile app Contact Bridge, we can allow individuals to self-service those kinds of exceptions themselves and do things like mark themselves unavailable because they're out sick or on vacation, or Matt's going to be unavailable on Friday, so he's going to trade with Mike that Friday shift or something like that. And what's really useful about that is it's a nice balance. I find that we found a nice balance between, right, the Wild West where anyone can do anything and say, oh, I'm unavailable forever, right? We certainly don't want that. And the other end of the spectrum where we have a really super heavy approval process and managers need to approve, and what if they don't, all of that. And what I found is a nice middle. What we have here is you're going to configure a calendar to perhaps notify the manager or distribution list whenever changes are made. But also, when people do things like trade shifts, perhaps, if I go in and mark Matt as covering my shift, but I didn't tell Matt about it, well, Matt's going to get an email saying that he's going to cover my shift, and then, right, we can let the people kind of work that out on their own. So we have a nice balance. So there's still some accountability, but it's lightweight and quick and simple. And that unavailable, whether it's a full day or a partial day or could repeat, there might be, Matt might be unavailable every Friday for the next month for some reason, right? And we can very easily set that up to start on the 28th, and for the next 4 Fridays, he's unavailable, and then it ends. And then you set it up one time, and it's all automatic. And Matt can be confident that he's not going to get called during his unavailable time because we're using this calendar to define who we're going to notify. Very simple example here. Right, here's a more kind of a silly example, but where you can have really a lot more flexibility in how you want to define your shifts or how you want to break up your day. Right, we have an early shift, we have on hours, we have off in this example, and there's lots of other things you could do here. You could do 3 days on, 3 days off, or a Kelly shift is popular in some circles. And really, what we're trying to do here is be as flexible as possible, right? So we can fit the way you work. We're not going to try to force you to work the way that we think you should, right? We want to have that flexibility. All right. Now, the way you use all this data, right, because ultimately this calendar is just data about your contacts, in addition to things like name and phone number and email address and things like that. The way you use that is through a rule, right? So this is, functionally a rule is just like a group, right? It's going to be a list of people. But what's special about rules is that what we're simply doing is defining a filter to go find the people that match this filter as of the time the message is sent. So if I were to send a message right at this exact moment, this particular rule would say, for this calendar, who's on shift right now? And Lisa, Andy, and Jim are on shift right now. Recall, this does not show you or define the sequence or the timing or anything like that. This just says these are the 4 people that are on right now. The calendar defines the sequence, and the incident template defines, do I want to use the sequence, and if I do, what do I want the timing to be? And where that's really nice is now you can have different behaviors for the same on-call team for different incidents. You might say for the applications team on a critical incident, you want to have a 5-minute delay between people because you want to cycle through that sequence quickly. But for a high priority or less critical incident, it's not as critical, so you want to have a different timing or something like that. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility to tailor that incident template to behave differently for different events, rather than saying, here's my on-call, it's always 5 minutes or something like that, right? So again, just that flexibility is what we're trying to bring to the table here. Another useful tool, right? I don't want you to think that you have to set up a calendar for everything necessarily. You might have, and I've seen this before, you might have a simple a group of people that manages an application, and there's only a handful of them, and it's very specialized, and they don't need a calendar. There really is no schedule. They're just always on call all the time because that's how it is, and I've seen that before. So you certainly could put them on a calendar, even though it never really changes. If you need something simple, you could simply just define a group of people and then put a sequence into that group. Right, I just have my Cerner core group. Lisa and Vonda are just always on all the time. And I just have the sequence, right? I should always call Lisa first because she's the specialist, and Vonda is just a backup. So this is a case where I don't want or need rotation in this case. I just want to have my group of people and a sequence to run through. And you can do that as well. So it doesn't have to be a calendar, right? So just more tools in the toolbox. One of the other things that can be useful here, and this is where, and it could happen, let's say Remedy is down for some reason, right? That certainly is potentially could happen, or your network is down, or who knows what. And you always have Everbridge here as an available tool. Hopefully things don't get bad, but if and when things get bad, you always have Everbridge as that backup. So let's say Remedy is down, or you can't get to the internet, and all you have is a mobile phone or a tablet or something like that. Right? You can always come to Everbridge directly to launch messages to start notifying people as well. And it's a very simple interface, like I had mentioned. Here's the same example before. Someone could just come in here, and you can do this on our mobile managed bridge. You can do this as well. You simply fill in the details, and you can launch an incident that way. So you can still get the message out, even if, say, Remedy is down, and so therefore you couldn't take advantage of the connector. So you always have that as a backup, right? We're big on resiliency, right? There's the Remedy connector. You could come here just using a web browser to launch a message if you've been granted access, of course. There's the mobile app if you can't use your computer for some reason. And then if things get really bad and all you can do is call somebody, you can call us and identify yourself and we'll launch a message for you. Right? So there's always that way to get that message out, no matter how bad things get. So that's an important thing to note, is this integration, it's not an all or nothing. You can have it integrated, but still have this manual launching capability as a backup or for other scenarios perhaps. So you can use the tool in both ways. Well, like Tanya had mentioned, excuse me, there's also some other tools for integration up above and beyond the connector should you want to take advantage of them. One being our fully RESTful API really allows you to integrate with really any application or system that can talk to us over the internet, right? It's a simple JSON set of web services. So I want to launch an incident, I want to manage contacts, right? Lots of flexibility there if you need to build something custom. But there's also our email ingestion engine, and this can be very useful for maybe systems, legacy systems that maybe can't take advantage of web services, and all they can do is send emails, let's say. And this is where we could very easily create an email ingestion rule where I want to send it from star@yourcompany.com or something like that. And you end up sending an email to Everbridge, and you can define things like the subject has to contain this word or something like that. And then you can simply map to an incident template and parse that email and define how do I want this email parsed to fill in the incident template to launch that message. Whether it's simply looking for tokens like a start and an end, or there's a full regular expression engine for really more advanced parsing of an email to break it out into pieces and notify people. Up to and including parsing out portions of the email to determine who should get notified is also an option as well. All right, so this can be very powerful. What's cool about this is where I've seen this in practice is maybe, like I said, you maybe have an older system that can't use web services, but it can send emails. So here's a really simple way where you can get that sort of system integrated. Maybe you need integration that's just temporary. I just need something for the next 90 or 120 days because I'm changing systems, or I'm building something through the API, but it's not going to be ready next week. I just need something in the interim. This is a very simple and easy, configurable way to have that integration set up quickly, again, for that interim perhaps, or something like that. So that's another tool in the toolbox that can be very useful for integration, just depending on your needs. Sort of related to that in this section, what the Remedy connector does, right, is a part of that information that's sent back from Everbridge to Remedy. Things like someone confirmed or someone answered a polling question or those types of events are sent back through these webhooks. Now, you could have several of these for different systems. This is another case where I want to use the API, say, for a monitoring system, let's say. And when someone acknowledges a message, I want that event to be sent back through a webhook to my monitoring system to clear the alarm or something like that. And this is where you can define those webhooks to take advantage of that and help people responding, or you ask them, do you want to restart the server, yes or no? Well, if they say yes, we could send that message back through a webhook, and that could ultimately fire off some runbook automation that reboots a server or something like that. So really a lot of cool things you could do with this. Right, the sky's the limit, so to speak, in cases like that. So this is where this is very extensible, and not only do we have this Remedy connector, but now here we have a more comprehensive platform that you can grow into as time goes on, right? To be that single platform for communications.